Hello. So we'll get right into it since the time is running and she mentioned the title, so we can move on. Yeah, so this is what's going to happen today. I'm going to give a bit of a background about a couple of things, Japanese socioeconomic situation and this study in general. Talk a little bit about my participants, get into the data analysis, findings. These are going to be the main parts that you want to kind of, that I'm trying to feature, so we're going to get through these kind of quickly and get to this. And then my research questions that I had, which were 3, and then some recommendations that I came up with. And then what's for the future. So basically, I found this wonderful image, and I thought that this kind of explained the situation, some of the situations in Japan, and that I used to base my study off of, or the problems that I was targeting and trying to research. You see here like deflation, low birth rate, and then less working, and then taxes on working to support Social Security, and then decreased wealth and push it down. So these are some of the economic situations, and some of them flow into the socio side, like it says low birth rate. I think it's pretty well documented that Japan is having a low birth rate, which is causing a lot of problems to the way that Japanese society is structured socioeconomically, because they need a lot of people to support the demographic, basically. So this poses a problem to the situation that Japan is dealing with. So this is part of the background as to why I'm doing the study that I'm doing. The other part of it is that I'm a doctoral student, and part of my doctoral, this is part of my dissertation, and this is the end of my dissertation. Hopefully, the end. I was looking at how companies in Japan value study abroad when they're asking for globally competent human resources. So in Japan, the catchphrase is global jinzai, so global human resource development. And universities are being called on by businesses, so businesses want these globally competent workers to come in and invigorate their companies, and so that they can go to the international market and compete competitively with the rest of the Asia-Pacific Rim, but also Europe and such. So they're really, this is a focus of Japan. So businesses say, give us good workers who can go abroad and function in a global marketplace competently. And so that's the other part of my research, and how those two kind of meld. So you have these socioeconomic issues, and those globally competent human resources will make businesses competitive. Businesses in Japan will then obviously do well economically, financially, and that kind of boosts Japan's economic situation. So it's kind of like one situation helps the other situation. So that's kind of the background of my study. And I've been looking at a particular university, how universities come into this. I focus it through the lens of the various funding programs that MEXT has been providing to universities, so that they spur internationalization and all these different programs, study abroad programs, all these different efforts to send students abroad, bring students in. The university I was looking at particularly received a 5-year Go Global Japan grant, and that was to send students abroad, Japanese students. So the focus was to get Japanese students to study abroad and improve the study abroad numbers. So that was a way that they would increase, that was one of their internationalization efforts. So I really focused on that. So I kind of like had these broad issues, and I used a very particular university in a situation to kind of bring light to all these broader issues. So that's why I did a case study. And this is the other part I was saying before, a bit more background. I explored issues of like globalization, internationalization, these kind of like big concept terms come up a lot in, I would say they're catchphrases, but they're catchwords. But the reality is Japan is in globalization. And when I say globalization, the way I define globalization very, very simply is just like a hyper-connectedness, where things are just goods and services, trade barriers are all coming down, and things are just moving at a very fast pace. So instead of, I say this, globalization has been around for centuries upon centuries upon centuries, when guys and people got on ships and decided, hey, let's go here and trade our goods in this end of the world. It just took a lot longer. Now everyone just gets on the, ooh, Alibaba, or ooh, Amazon.com. That's globalization, just obviously it's a lot faster. So let's see globalization just basically just like a speeding up of this, with these relationships, this hyper-connected for relationships. So in my study, I looked at these three kind of socioeconomic entities: government, academia, and business, and how they work together to deal with issues in Japan. So if you think of the white space as kind of external factors that act on each one of these situations, they kind of pressure each one of these socioeconomic entities to act in a certain way. So this is Japan, and this is action. And some external factors act on a certain socioeconomic entity, and they move individually. So business, for example, business generally moves faster than these other two. So globalization is happening. Businesses have factories abroad. They're feeling it a lot faster. So they're like, we need better human resources. So they create programs to improve their human resources. But then they realize, wait a minute, we have a shortage of quality human resources. How do we get that? So then they go to academia and say, hey, move quicker. And then academia kind of acts. And then academia says, well, we don't have the money to do this stuff, nor, I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but I think, so they go to the government and say, hey, we need the money, and then government acts in a certain way. It can all happen simultaneously, or individually, and then one gets to one end and realize they can't do something, so they ask another actor to kind of move. So that's why I labeled this like Japan interdependent and holistic action. So there's different ways that they're acting, the different ways that they're acting. So I kind of looked at this situation as well, and I labeled it kind of like pressure, reaction, dynamic, independent, interdependent, continuum. And I use this in my dissertation as a model to explain a lot of the findings and explain like what I was actually trying to think about. So I tried to put it in a picture to make it a little easier. Save pages. So I collected a lot of data, and I did a qualitative case study, so I collected a lot of documents, and I interviewed people, and going through all that, I had to code everything. And in particular, my coding style and the way I conducted my case study, if you look at Yin, Robert K. Yin, and his case study ideas, it's very simple. He does like what they call pattern matching. And I followed that basically to the T. There's not a whole lot that I really did differently. I kind of really stuck to that structure. Otherwise, a lot of things were happening. It was getting very confusing. So I really kind of followed that very much. And this is my coding protocol that I came up with to figure out all my data and my codes and a lot of stuff. So he says this, like, you identify the ideas that relate to initial thematic patterns, and that comes from your background research, really, and your review literature. So a lot of the background research that I did in my literature kind of gave birth to a particular set of codes, a particular set of ideas that basically I used as my base. So this is what I see observations. This is what I'm seeing now. And then on the back half, once I collected all my data, I had a questionnaire and survey results, and then I kind of matched these to the code, the patterns that I came up with in the beginning. Do they match the patterns that I get out of this information, right? So so I had a questionnaire, a survey, and I should have put up some the interviews that I did, right? So yeah, so you take the ideas from step one and you make it smaller, continue the process until the themes. This is, I think, basic qualitative research kind of, ideas. So I use like an inductive process to then kind of build these patterns. So you refine, do you come up with any new ideas? Again, this is more of like a refined process. Again, compare and contrast the ideas. This is something that I kind of do always, is like to add a reflective process, reflect on the entire process, searching for future ideas, and then this is the end, right? So you develop your findings, recommendations, implications, and conclusions. So I just kind of followed this, this kind of protocol to get my findings, what I have today. This is the schematic that I drew up of the process, so of actual things I found. So if you start from the bottom, I would say bottom up. If you start from the bottom, you have your background research and literature review. So this is, because it's an inductive process, so I'm starting with these observations, right? I didn't really have any preconceived notions, like this is what I'm looking for, right? I'm trying to prove this. I wasn't trying to prove anything. And I just observed these things from research and literature, and I came up with these initial codes, right? So we had next higher education policies, and you can see, so these were the initial codes that I came up with. And then I refined these into these categories: study abroad, Japanese attitudes, and these categories here. And then, yeah, so then I looked at those categories, and then I gathered my data, and then we came up with these. You saw the picture before, the pressure reaction dynamic and independent interdependent continuum. So these kind of patterns is what I was getting from this research as I was going up. And then the overall general theme of government, academia, business relationships. So if I were to say, like, in one sentence, what are you talking about? Oh, I'm talking about relationships between government, academia, and business. And this is how I got there. This was very necessary to show my dissertation committee, IRB, and all those people who review my dissertation. How did you get from here to here? And what does, you say this, but what does that mean? So I had to go back. And I didn't really have to go back, I just had to put it in order. I have a notebook and it's filled with notes of things. I had to put it all in a schematic that made sense to these people. So, yeah, so this is kind of the process. Actual coding that I used and how I got there. So, I did interviews to also, because one thing I was looking at is not just what does the literature say, but then the people who are actually living the experience of these programs. They're in a university, these programs come, all of a sudden students are being bombarded. You need to study abroad, you need to go here, you need to do this. We're looking for globally competent people. So I went and I found, I didn't find. So I went and did interviews with, I tried to get students, and here in my study, 2 student participants were involved. Now the students, there's a very particular criteria. You have to have studied abroad for more than 1 year. why was that the case? Because in a lot of the literature, what I was seeing is that in terms of what businesses say they were looking for these globally competent students. How did they get there? And a lot of literature said, yeah, there's a long-term study abroad and the transformation of students and the skills and things like that. So I was looking at students who studied abroad for longer than 1 year. So that's why I did that. And I put out a general call. So these were the students who actually responded. I went through the university international affairs program or department, and I put out a general call, and these are the students that replied. And yeah, just student participant A, student participant B. I would usually use names, but for my university, they were very, very strict about identifying remarks, because I was going through a US university. They're very strict about, like, why did you choose that name? Make it just general. Otherwise, I would never be able to do the study. I talked to a hiring manager in the local area who recruits from the university. Again, I went through the career office and they helped me locate someone who would be willing to do that. I talked with the next official who was actually in charge of developing Go Global Japan, the internationalization programs. So this person had first-hand knowledge of that. And I also talked with 3 university administrators in different departments. They were unrelated to each other. So I talked to university administrators, 2 of which were, one was in career affairs, one was in international affairs. So, and one was just a general, was like what's his title? He was an executive. So I interviewed them to get the perspective of the university and what they thought of these programs and such. So yeah, so in one sense I'm looking at it from this kind of 30,000 foot, like how are all these policies and what's going on socioeconomically, and then I'm also looking at an example of a university going through these internationalization programs and policies. So yeah, so I took these, that's why I chose, this is why these 7, because yeah, because they were on the ground dealing with a lot of this stuff. So that's why I kind of talked to them. So my findings. So I used the schematic before you saw with all the different layers and codes. So I used that and I overlaid that onto my interview data to compare the patterns. So am I getting the same? Are these looking the same? Yes, no? And my initial finding is that in general, yes, the patterns matched. What I was seeing before in the background and the background literature and all that information was coming out in the interviews, actually coming out very distinctly in the interviews. And so some of these, one is that more specific finding is that, yeah, study abroad is a neutral thing. So this is for businesses, right? When businesses are looking at study abroad, they see it as kind of like a, yeah, we have a lot of factors that we're looking to study abroad. It's just one of those factors. It's not higher, lower, doesn't really matter. It's all the factors. This is particular to this university and the companies that recruit from this university. This is not like a generalization. This is just what they're saying here. Internationalization programs, yeah, they're important, but Japanese companies still like to do their own in-house training. So they want globally competent students, but when they come in, they're still going to do in-house training the way they want to do it. So that's something that I thought was interesting. But they do say this. Some interviewers, the hiring manager in particular, and the career affairs manager both said willingness to challenge oneself is important. So, did you want to do something? That's important to prospective employers. In terms of the students, students value study abroad experience, but they do hope that businesses do the same. So interestingly with the students, they didn't have any preconceived notion of like, well, no, they thought businesses will like this, and I hope they like it, but I'm not sure if they will or they won't. So they do their study abroad experiences, and they go and study abroad for various purposes, but they do hope businesses will value study abroad the same way. Yeah, I found this interviews necessary for, so that was from the results of like the data collection. This is more of like the results from the entire case study, is that I think when you're doing and you're looking for information, definitely I find interviews necessary because you can read a lot of data and you can read a lot of data and you can look at a lot of things, but interviews are really necessary if you want to understand what's happening. Yeah, and I'll look at this in this last one with, I found two things that emerged was motivation, and this is based off of what students were saying, that the students I interviewed seemed very motivated to do their own thing, and I think that was very important. And then this one is that there is this English language ability debate, which I didn't get into in the study, is that some businesses find that English in particular can be helpful, but again, it's a neutral thing. Does it matter that they're studying or going to learn English? Maybe, not really, but there still seems to be there's a debate about this. I think that's my time, and this is really, we got to the findings because that's the main thing I wanted to get to. Okay. These are the research questions and recommendations, but I will give the rest of the people time. Thank you. Okay.